Good afternoon. You're so welcome to this afternoon's broadcast. My name is Andy Magill, Head Vitality Coach, and it's my pleasure to be presenting to you today and presenting with our very special guest, Phil Ferrar, on building high-performing teams and maximising potential. Phil joins us today. He's an executive level coach and behavioural change expert, and it's our absolute pleasure to have you here, Phil. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Feeling good?
Yeah, good. Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. I feel really excited to get into today's content, but before we do, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It's our pleasure to have you here with us. What I'll do is I'll just direct you to the right-hand side of your screen, and there are two areas that we just want you to have a little look at. First of all, we've got our handout section. In the handout section, please take the time to have a look at that during today's webinar. That has got details of the events that we're running this month, where we're focusing a lot around sort of men's health. So please take the time, download that, register for upcoming events, and in addition to that, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can continue to get lots of exciting content. Secondly, there's a Q&A panel. So again, we've already had some questions submitted in advance, so thank you for those individuals that have done so. We'll do our very best to get to those. In addition to that, we're here. This is why I've got my laptop in front of me. We'll be welcoming questions as we go through today's content. So if there's anything that pops up, any thoughts, feedback, any questions at all, please do pop them in the Q&A box, and myself and Phil will do our very best to try and answer them for you.
Yeah,
perfect. So without much further ado, now I will say you need no introduction, and I think as we go through today's conversation, your experience across all sort of manners of industries, sports, working with executives, all the way through down to sort of professional athletes is going to come across. But I suppose I'm not going to go easy on you. First question is, with all of your experience ranging from corporate through to elite sport, working with coaches through to high-level performers, what's it all about? What does it all boil down to in terms of maximising potential and building high-performing teams?
Right. So there's a lot of focus in high-performing teams on the task in hand, the goals and making sure people are aligned and committed to that and clear. But what I think is often overlooked at the expense of the team is the human element. And this translates across all sectors, sport, corporate world, and so on. Whenever you have a team, the human element is going to be key to whether that is a high-performing team or not. So you can get everything else right, but if the chemistry is not right within that group of people, when all said and done, it's a human endeavor, and the focus on human shouldn't be overlooked. It's really important to get that right.
Ultimately, for us to achieve anything, it requires us as individuals to take action, but then in addition to that, for those individuals to work together as a team. What are the, I suppose, in terms of an individual, or alternatively, in terms of actually realizing this action and taking it, can you provide a little bit more detail as to what that actually involves?
Okay. Right, so there are some fundamentals. One is whether you're a team leader, a manager, a member of the team, is if you really want it to be sweet and to work really well, is to understand yourself first and foremost, and have good knowledge of how you tend to react to situations and people, and understand the impact you have on other people. Now, the second part of this is really important, because how can you understand the impact you'll have on someone else if you don't understand something about them? So it's really important to look and listen and really try and work out why or how someone else is different. Because I think an absolute is that every individual is unique. Every individual is unique. We can look beyond the usual categories that we put around people. In my view, the true meaning of diversity is everyone is unique. You can look past all of the other definitions and things and categories that we place on people. And if someone's unique, they see the world differently to you. It may only be slightly differently, but they have a different perspective. And if you ask a number of people how they see you, they're going to see you slightly different from each other. And understanding that's really important, because if you want to understand why you have the impact you do on other people, you've got to try and look at it through their eyes. Okay. And frankly, if you can, talk about it. Ask them, talk to them about it. I mean, the high-performing team would do that. They'd be very open about it. Those two things are so important whether you're a coach, a manager, a leader, an executive, you know, or a member of the team, if it's going to be truly high performing, that understanding is really important. It's like celebrate the differences. Don't look at someone and think, oh, they're a bit weird, you know, because you're immediately putting them in a box which is not helpful to you or the team.
Absolutely.
It's yes, they're going to be different to you. That doesn't mean they're weird. They're just different. And of course, they will see you in a way which might surprise you. But from their perspective, they're right. You know, that's the way they see you. You may not agree with that perspective, but you have to work with it.
Absolutely.
And try and work together to really understand how each of you work. So it's the team. It is about individuals, and it's about individuals working with other individuals, and ultimately working across the team. If you can't get that bit right, that's where teams will have some element of dysfunction, not least the whispering about people. So in the US, they call it the water cooler conversations, where, you know, two people are whispering about someone in the team, but they're not saying it to their face. They're not actually engaging with that person. In the UK, be the coffee machine conversations, you know.
Exactly.
And if that happens, you don't have a high performing team. It's a team, probably, but it's not a high performing team.
And I think it's important to highlight that what you're saying. Okay, so let's go back in terms of, it starts with us in terms of our understanding of ourselves, understanding of others, and then appreciating or understanding or trying to appreciate how others see us. Now, it's not always a negative thing, because I think what I'm picking up on that is that we may perceive ourselves in a certain way, but others may perceive us in a different way, which is, I suppose, it's not a negative thing. It can be totally positive. Can you give us an example, or any sort of teams that you've worked with in the past where I suppose there hasn't been that clicking, and ultimately that will impact that has impacted the outcome? Okay,
I'll take you to the other side of the world, to women's beach volleyball in California.
Vastly different to where we are in grey London today.
And we're talking about 6'3", 6'5" women volleyball players, the top, you know, right in the top echelon in world sport. Building up to the Tokyo Games, I was introduced to probably the top pick of the US teams, and it was Kerry, Walsh, Jennings, who is a star in the US. I mean, she'd already got 3 gold medals, and April Ross, who was a newcomer and a new member of that team, because the previous team member of Kerry's had retired after London. And they got, you know, on paper, they were a perfect match. It's, in terms of their skills and commitment and everything else, totally 100% right on the button. But they weren't hitting it off. They weren't gelling. And the reason they weren't gelling is that they're completely different people. It's almost like total opposites. So Kerry was this wonderful, sociable, highly sociable, very engaging, very personable individual. Great with the media, great with fans, great with everyone. And she would want to get on with everyone. It's really important to her that she does. And then April, she won't mind me saying this, is it's all about the task. It's all about the job. It's all about what we've got to achieve. And her instinct is one of a killer, basically. It's right, get the job done, bang, you know. So different. And really, that's sort of, you can understand why they didn't necessarily hit it off. So it's characterized by April turning up at a training session in the first thing in the morning and say, right, what are we going to do then? What are we doing today? And there was no, how was your weekend? You know, how's the family? All that sort of thing, which of course Kerry couldn't understand. This person coming in, it's almost like a machine. And they were sort of circling each other, not really engaging with each other. And they were, I mean, I'm not sure about the whispering at the coffee machine, but there was an element of that going on, because there was something about the other person that puzzled them. For both of them, is working both ways. And once we got to the point of being able to feed that back to them, hold the mirror up to them each, and help them understand hey, she's not a bad person, you know, and she's a perfect match for this team. So that then led to them talking about it with each other, which was a bit uncomfortable to start with, a little bit pensive. But eventually they got to the point where they were laughing about it with each other.
Fantastic.
And Kerry was saying, well, I'd like to be more of a killer. You know, how do you do that?
Celebrating the differences.
So celebrating the differences, understanding and valuing the differences, and breaking that down.
So that's an example from the upper echelons of high performance sport for many of our viewers today, ourselves included, who are working in everyday business, no matter if it be a small business or a large business. In a practical sense, well, I suppose firstly, please let us know if this resonates for your own experience. I'm sure we probably all got examples from the real world. In a practical sense, how could we come to a similar outcome as you did with the volleyball players in terms of our own day-to-day? Like, what kind of things could we do to bring up that conversation or start to celebrate our differences? Because it's probably take a lot of us out of our comfort zone to be able to do that step forward.
I think it would, and I think that's where, you know, as a team, you would perhaps agree that you would maybe try this out tentatively to start with. But if we had an exchange and I said, okay, we've got 2 minutes, I'm going to say, Andy, if you want to get the best out of me, then these are the sort of things to think about in terms of, and if you want to avoid getting the worst out of me, then maybe these are things to consider. Now it's your turn. And if you do that throughout the team, which can be a very fun thing to do, but it's also very revealing. And then you've started that conversation between colleagues. That's okay, it's all right to talk about this, because I've always thought that about you, but actually that's an interesting perspective. Now I sort of understand why you are like that. So an example might be someone in the team who's highly technical and very pernickety about detail, and that might irritate someone who's more outgoing and more of a sort of customer-facing person. And it does irritate. You're not that person. They don't. They have a different worldview to you. But understanding why that person is like that and how they're valuable to the team is really important. Once you get to that point, it is valuing and celebrating the differences.
Because ultimately, are there similarities between, you've worked in lots and lots of different sports. The principles and your approach to, as we keep saying, realizing potential and getting that high performance, is it exactly like, I don't, maybe not to put words in your mouth, but are there similarities between all of the different sports versus within an organization? You will have your accounts department, you will have your HR department, you'll have sales, you'll have the technical. Is it the same principles between high performing sport and, say, for example, interacting with individuals across different specialties within a business? Is it the same?
You do. You may I mean, a lot of sports will have teams within the team. So with rugby sevens, you know, you've got different functions and people made up of very, very different backgrounds as well. But even within a small setup like beach volleyball, they've got support staff, they've got coaches. Everyone has a particular role, and they're coming from a different sort of background in terms of delivering that role. So you do get these silos naturally, because you've got to focus on the job in hand, and that's your role. So you need to do that. Now, if you expand that out, someone like BMW, who we worked with over a period of 5 years in a culture change program, you know, that's you understand that you're going to have these silos where people work to that agenda, but somehow you've got to try and create a feeling of one team out of that. So it's transferable across different, you know, sports and corporate, but it's also small and big teams. It all comes down to the fact it's human endeavor, but the focus should be on human. You know, let's get that right, because it's often overlooked.
It is. Let's talk about one thing that in our pre-discussion sort of came up as a common theme, and something that's, particularly in the business world, our lives are built around the meeting. And I suppose this is maybe, we're getting more into sort of, again, the practical elements and the practical application of realizing potential. What are the types of things? Why do we have meetings? Why should we have meetings? But alternatively, I suppose, what's the opportunity within them to actually get sort of push the team forwards in a positive manner and get that levels of engagement?
Meetings are a part of our life in whatever world we're in, corporate or otherwise. In the corporate world in particular, in the world outside of sport in particular, we spend a lot of time in meetings. So I remember asking the management team at BMW how much time they spend in the meeting, what percentage of their time. And it was a very high level. I mean, we're talking over 50%. Now, if that's the case, though, those meetings, you've got to question that, right? But also, if those meetings aren't as productive as they could be, that's an awful lot of wasted time.
Absolutely.
But we are creatures of habit, so we tend to go into automatic mode when it comes to meetings. This is the way we've always done it. Fill the agenda with lots and lots of different items. Do we ever check in with the people in the room? How you doing, Andy? How's it going? Because that might seem like wasted time, busy, but actually we're talking about human beings. It's really important to be able to do that and listen and pick up on that. Well, the welfare of the team, how we do it? How's each person doing? Tell us quickly, briefly, but tell us where you're at the moment, because we can factor that in. And then getting sucked into the business of the agenda, we're not right. One of the things that can happen, this is a habit, is that it's
also a bugbear, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I've seen it so many times, believe me. Is that the meeting? Who owns the meeting? Who owns the meeting? And it's usually the boss, right? So now you're saddled with that. If you're the boss, you're saddled with that responsibility. So the people in the meeting will think, "Oh, this is going on a bit. This is going on too long. It's been an hour. God, we're up to an hour and a half now. I'm not going to say anything because it's not my place to say anything. It's Andy's meeting."
Yeah.
And frankly, that's not a high-performing team. Any member of that team, any person in that meeting should be able to say, "We've talked around this a while. Do you think we ought to be making a decision or what?" And in order for that to happen, the manager, the leader, needs to consciously think about that and plan it into meetings. So, okay, what's the purpose of the meeting? But one of the purposes of the meeting is to get everyone engaged and everyone involved. And that should form part of my thinking before we get there. And it may well mean as a result of that, you actually approach meetings in a different way. Because ultimately, and this comes back to this thing about a high-performing team, the notion of leader and follower is old school, I'm afraid. And it's still important if you're dealing in a crisis or an emergency, you want a leader to step up and everyone to follow. Of course, we get that. But for 90% of the stuff that we do, no, that's not the way anymore. A truly high-performing team, you would have every member of that team demonstrates leadership. So if you take the All Blacks, the rugby, New Zealand rugby, for example, they've recognized this, and they recognize that leaders create leaders, and everyone encourages everyone else to step up and show some leadership. I think, Andy, we need a new word, because leader isn't very helpful anymore, because it suggests followers. And to say to a member of the team, "You're a leader," that doesn't sit right either for some of them. They think, "Well, I'm not a leader. I'm not paid to be a leader." But if it's going to be about collaboration, which is clearly the way forward, if you really want a high-performing team, you need everyone engaged. So that's another word that we hear a lot.
Of course.
Engagement. But are they truly engaged, or do they think it's Andy's problem? I'm not going to say anything. It's not my place.
Yeah.
Because you're just then not tapping into the full potential of the team.
No. At this point, I'll come back to our viewers. Any suggestions in terms of new terms for leaders?
Yeah.
Greatly welcome. Please pop them in, and we'll read out your suggestions. I want to focus on this for a little element, or for a little bit of time, with regards to the being a leader versus being a manager versus being a team member. Now, I suppose, as is tradition and what normally happens within organizations, and dare I say within the coaching world as well, if I think about a lot of high performing coaches, they themselves have played the sport. They themselves have been involved in that world for a long time, are technical experts. The same goes for in the corporate world, in the business world, generally technical experts, because they're excellent at what they do, are high performing in themselves, find themselves in positions of responsibility and leadership, which can be, which is fantastic, but at the same time I can appreciate what we're talking about today is a totally different skill set and might be quite against what their natural skill set is in terms of, I suppose, following the agenda, focusing on the tasks versus what you're proposing, and sharing with us is very much opening it out, and as you say, focusing on the human at the start of it. I suppose any insights with regards to what you see, that be this in sport or in business, what are leaders doing generally versus what should they actually be doing to realize the potential in their team?
Well, you're quite right. Most of us, myself included, going way back, were promoted because they got a particular specialist skill or technical skill. And that's important. You know, it's not going to go away, because I think technical know-how is really important.
You need to know what you're doing.
If you're a top-level coach, you're there because you know the sport inside out, and you know how to coach around the mechanics of the sport. But leadership is something else. And a metaphor I use is hats. So, you know, you're employed, you've got a manager's hat on, okay, got manager on there. But for whoever's those people that are managers, you've also got another hat. It's called leader, or whatever word you come up with. But that might be somewhere in your job description, but it's not obvious in most cases. And we tend to focus on what you need to do as a manager, and those things are still important. But it's recognizing that sometimes you need to perhaps even take that off and say, okay, this is about collaboration. It's not about me. This meeting is not about me. I really need to get people engaged. I really need them, because you can't make them engaged. You've got to create the conditions for that. So that means stepping back a bit and saying, okay, over to you. And you now got your leader hat on. You're now thinking in a different way, because your job as a leader, if you wanted to sum it up, is to create the conditions for everyone else to step up and ultimately be successful. Right, but it's more of a you're creating those conditions like a catalyst so you're doing the right things, not the wrong things. If you step in as manager, there's a chance you're going to stifle the creativity, and the, you know, they're not going to, they perhaps feel less inclined to step up into that. And it's you're right. I mean, we don't. It's not something you get taught to do. I mean, there's lots of stuff on leadership out there, but it's not that easy to absorb, although it's quite simple underneath it all.
Exactly.
Right?
So I don't know if you've got an example, or if you've sort of got some insights. What does that look like? So I think what you're saying here is, obviously people who are in the position of leadership need to wear different hats.
Yeah.
My question is twofold, I suppose. Does that mean that the individuals within the team, they can also wear different hats at different times? And I suppose if that is the case, what does it look like in manifesting? Is it, I don't know, I'm guessing, is there always a cohesive environment? Is it subject to sometimes to open questionings and the leader themselves being challenged? I don't know if you've got any examples or stories around sort of what that actually looks like in reality.
Oh, let me give an example. So we work with the USA women's épée fencing. That's one of the categories of fencing. In the build up to the World Championships, they were 8th in the world when we met them, and fencing is a solo sport, okay, but then they put together a team for a team medal as well. Now that's, you know, the parallel there would be a sales force, and I've heard this many times, salespeople saying, I don't need to be part of a team. I'm getting measured on my results, not the team. Right? But you're trying to make me feel, and it's a very similar thing, but it's about shared goals and about trying to create something that's bigger than just the individual. So in the case of women's épée, there are 4 very, very talented fencers, but they weren't gelling. They simply weren't hitting it off, and they weren't able to openly talk about it. And one of the reasons was 2 of the fencers were sisters, so they've been fencing together, living together for years. So you've got a team within a team,
right?
And that creates division, and that creates a sort of awkwardness around talking about the team. And you know, that phrase "elephant in the room," there was a big really elephant in the room, which wasn't being addressed and talked about. So you go back to this thing about, if you want people to be a high-performing team, as a leader, you've got to try and create ways in which you can encourage them to step up. And the simple thing that was done there was, by the coach with our guidance, was to say, look, there's an elephant in the room. Do we all see what it is? And it was done very constructively. With no, I mean, you don't just suddenly launch that into them. You do some work and some build up to get to this point in terms of talking about the how we do things around here as a high performing team. But once they got to this point, one of the sisters owned up and said, yeah, we're the elephant, aren't we? And said, yeah, well done, well spotted. So it's uncomfortable because nobody likes that sort of thing to come out. No. It makes you feel difficult. But if the focus of that was how we do things around here, so it's having that sort of discussion and debate with everyone in the team to say, come on, it's not me, it's not just down to me as the boss. What do you believe are the key things that we need to do in terms of how we behave together and work as a team, and ending up with some sort of code that everyone's subscribed to and said, yeah, I'm up for that. So don't put anything in that you're not prepared to sign up to. This is yours, this is everyone's. And then once you've got that, there's clarity around how we do things around here. Yeah. And the next thing, and this is the hard bit, is making sure, is how do you make that happen? Well, it's hard work and you have to keep coming back to it. And people need to help each other. Everyone will slip, even the boss. You're not going to get it right every time, old habits. But it's trying to keep the thing on track and not blaming people if they get it wrong occasionally, but just saying, hey, come on. So that's something to add to your meetings. Every now and again in a meeting at the end, say, how are we doing against this code that we all agreed? Yeah. Talk about it. I've got my view, but talk about it. Let's get some, where are we? What do we need to, is there stuff that we need to do a bit more of or a bit less of? What are the sort of things we need to address? And it is hard work, but again, coming back to it's a high performing team that would do that.
But that means that the person who's in the position of leadership, I suppose ultimately then needs to, well, in ways this could be quite empowering because we're giving them the right to say, look, you don't always have to have the answers. You don't always have to sort of be in charge. You can have different roles. But then in addition to that, what we're saying is like the team can come up with a solution, and that's how you engage. Can I just delve deeper into a little bit of versus maybe we're kind of straying towards culture here. You're talking about the individual themselves and understanding what makes you tick, how you get the best out of me. Then you're also talking about sort of how we do things around here. Yeah. Do we need to separate the two? And does that then allow you to create a culture where high performance is the natural byproduct?
I think the two should go hand in hand. I think you start with it doesn't really matter where you start if it's how we do things around here, but I think a greater understanding of individuals, themselves and other people will oil the wheels of that anyway. So it's really important. I think so you do both of those things. You're laying the right foundations for the team and a high performing team. And then of course the things to bear in mind on top of that is that it's constantly changing. You get a new member into the team, new person into the team. It's a new team. The chemistry, the dynamics has changed. You can't say, well, look at the poster. We did that a year ago. That's what we said. That's how we're going to do things around here. Yeah. Well, that was then, but now you've got a new. It's different. Do we need to revisit it? And the answer is keep it alive. And of course, the most important thing is to live what you've said, which is a big responsibility, in particular for the manager or the leader or the coach.
So how do you strike the balance then between maintaining a culture of high performance, or alternatively, you figured out what it is that you do, how you work as a team? Absolutely, whenever a new person comes on board or someone leaves, there's definitely going to be a change in pace. There's going to be a change in the dynamics within the group. What's the balance between allowing the team to adapt to that versus having to change how things work around here? Well, what's the balance? Because you don't want to say to, for example, a new starter saying, this is how we do things around here. You ultimately want to bring them on the journey with you. How would I as a manager do that? And also, how would I, as the person coming on board, how could I maybe facilitate that and be part of the process and ensure that I am part of the process?
I think it evolves, and I think there needs to be some intent to make sure that things stay true and stay on track, and acknowledge that maybe over time this thing we've produced might need to be revisited.
Yeah.
So I mean, the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team, are a really good example of this, because when they get a new player into the squad, it's not a question of, well, this is how, look, Mr. Newbie, this is how we do things around here. That's okay. We're interested. We value what you've got, what contribution you make to this. So they take that. It'll be one of the experienced players who takes on the role of being mentor to that new player every time, and they're not just absorbed. It's okay. It's a moving thing. So let's have a discussion around it. What's your perspective? You see how we do things. What have you got to add? So it becomes because they want them to engage with it, not just because they're a new member of the All Blacks, but because they believe in it. So it is important to keep working at that. Also, it's interesting. The hacker that they do at the start of the game. Often they give that to the new player. They put there to lead it, which is quite symbolic, isn't it? Absolutely. You're just as important as everyone else in this team.
Yeah.
So it's things like that, and I think if you've got it in your mind that things have changed, if you're the manager or you're a member of that team, recognizing that the new person is important and the chemistry has changed, that everyone should do a little bit to ensure that that team engages around, with that individual to form something new. It's a bit different at the very least. Yeah.
Phil, I'm mindful that there's so much, and there's so many insights that we're getting from you, but if we can just pull it back a little bit with regards to ultimately in that type of position and across any sort of, I suppose, environment change, which is ever evolving both in business and sport, the same three principles still apply to the individual and to the team. We need to be aware of ourselves. We need to understand others, and ultimately we then need to be aware of how others perceive us. Would you say that that's kind of like almost like the three basic rules that in any environment going into, we could kind of maybe stop, and rather than jumping into like a new environment head first, it's maybe worth taking the time? So just from a practical element, 10 minutes before a meeting, is it worth just reviewing things with that lens on, or before interviewing a new recruit, or alternatively presenting to the board or presenting down to your team, or whatever it might be? Is it worth just taking 5-10 minutes just reviewing that? I don't know. Would you have any advice or tips, like in terms of how to actually put this into practice?
I think keep it front of mind as far as possible, especially if you're the manager, you're the boss. But everyone's different, so don't rush to judge them. We all have biases. Everyone has them. They're built in, right? So as a sum total of our experience and our genes and everything else, it is that natural mechanism that says, if you see a lion, run. It's whether the lion is dangerous or not is another matter. It's just an automatic response, and if we judge people by those things, then by that sort of process, then we're missing out so much, and you need to look beyond that. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, because it will ultimately impact the way you behave with people. If you see them in a particular way, if you don't really appreciate where they're coming from and understand that they are unique and different, then there's a fair chance that you'll just carry on doing what you normally do. So I mean, years ago, 30 years ago, I used to look at people around me in my team and so on and think, why do they do that? I would never do that. What are they thinking? Because I would never think that. But they're not me. That's the point. It took me quite a long time to really realize that. So you just got to keep telling yourself, no, the world is, this world is comprised of people that are not like me. So stop being judgmental about it. Embrace it. Say, okay, they can do something I can't. That's fantastic. They might irritate the hell out of me, and I might never be the greatest friend of theirs. Because it's like, but appreciate it because they do things that I don't do.
Yeah.
And I think once you make that leap, then as a coach, as a leader, as a team member, it removes almost like a cloud or a web of stuff that you can get tangled in, and that's when you can start to motor.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Phil, we've had some questions submitted in advance, and
Right.
I see we've also got quite a number coming through. So what we'll do is we'll get stuck into it.
Can you read that?
Give me a second. I'll have to zoom in a second. But in terms of questions that were received in advance, just a couple here which I think are quite good. So teams share common goals, but individual aspirations vary. How do you get the most out of everyone, bearing that in mind?
Yeah, well, that goes back to what I said about fencing. It's an individual sport, but they have to come together. Well, they do come together as a team. The point is, if you joined a team, if you're part of a team, you may be a reluctant part of that team because your prime goal, like in sales, because your prime goal is you and your sales target. Right. So the question is, can you derive benefit from this team really working, really humming? And some people, some lone wolves would think no. And they may never be suitable for a team and therefore are going to be a fish out of water in that team. Some people, they're going to struggle. Majority would see the benefit in the energy you can create in a high performing team is just fantastic. It's great to be a part of. And people on the outside, they want to be part of that team.
Of course. Whereas
if it's a dysfunctional team, the opposite happens and it pushes people away. There's no way I want to join that team. And so if of course individual objectives and goals usually override. I mean, that's number one. Your own job, your own family, what you do with that. But in contributing to a team and making a really positive contribution to that team, it can be so much more. And ultimately, you gain, everyone gains, hopefully, as a result of that.
Cool. It's just something that you said there that I actually want to sort of go back on. You said sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah.
When does it not work? Have you seen it not work in the past?
Yeah, I've seen it not working. I mean, believe me, some dysfunctional teams that have won gold medals, right?
Okay.
And I won't choose the Olympics, but the Chicago Bulls, right, with Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Right? An amazing, in terms of their performance and their record, it's just incredible.
Phenomenal.
But there wasn't any love in that team. And a lot of it was because of Michael Jordan's, sort of behaviour in the team. And again, there were fights, they were falling out. So there are exceptions, but can you sustain that? And do you want to be part of a team that is like that, or would you like to be part of a team where it's a positive energy and wow, we're really motoring?
Of course.
So there are examples, but yeah,
there are examples of that. However, as you said, the longevity of that versus, for example, the All Blacks example, they've been dominant for many, many years.
Decades,
because it's beyond the player, it's about the jersey. They are each
ambassadors,
ambassadors. They're simply holding the jersey, custodians of the jersey for a number of years before passing it on. So very, very different in that regard.
Yeah, we use that example a lot with sports. But yeah, dysfunctional teams, you'd be surprised, I think, how dysfunctional top performers can be when it comes to it. But it generally comes down to that understanding human behaviour and how we can get the most out of each other.
Brilliant. I'll go for just one of our other sort of pre-submitted questions, which is, what's the single most powerful piece of info you've received to make you a better coach?
The single most important thing was the feedback that I'd had many years ago, which sort of set me off in this direction, really, which was about me as a manager.
Okay.
I remember going into this. I had a team of 20 people at this stage in a financial institution, going to work on a Monday morning. And by Monday lunchtime, my PA, we used to have PAs in those days, PA came to me and said, Phil, can I have a word with you? He said, yeah, what's the problem? What's the problem? Take a seat. I said, well, I don't know how to put this really, Phil, but it's you, Phil. I said, what do you mean it's me? Well, it's Monday and you come in and your face is like thunder and nobody wants to approach you. They're all scared of you, you know.
Wow.
And I said, wow, really? I said, well, I think it's because I'm so focused when I come in on a Monday. I've got all this work, you know, all this stuff to do.
Yeah.
And, it's like, well, I just thought you need to know. So I went to see my number two, my deputy, and said, I just had this feedback from Norma, my PA. I told him, he said, it's not just Monday mornings, Phil.
Oh no.
And that was 2 bits of feedback that changed my life.
Gold dust.
So I think for me, it's not going to be the same for everyone, but for me, understanding myself and understanding the impact I had was absolutely fundamental. And I couldn't be doing what I do now without that understanding. However, if you talk to my wife, she will tell you, oh, he's not as good as he thinks he is. And that's because you'll be doing it for the rest of your life. You know, if to get really good, I don't think you can ever get perfect at it. What you can do is try and keep moving forward on it. And that's definitely helped me. So there you go. That's number one.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I love that. So let's get into, I can't see them, but apologies, I am going to have to sort of stoop up a little bit. But so what I'm looking at here is in terms of, Phil, absolutely agree about value and accepting others' differences. What's your opinion about using personality profiles, for example, DISC in aiding or understanding?
Well, we use DISC. DISC is good because it's quite a simple model and people could grasp it. The most important thing, though, is not the profile, but the so what. So, you know, you go through a profile, you think, oh, that's interesting. So what do I do with it? And that's the point. And the thing is to use it to understand other people, use the model to understand other people and open up the sort of vista in understanding those other people and how they're different. They've got different strengths and limitations. We've all got strengths and limitations, and that usually the limitations are strengths overplayed. But understanding all of that and therefore on how others see it, that's the key. So it's a good starting point because it creates a common language.
That's what I was going to say. It starts the conversation. So I suppose like in any measurement tool, it has its advantages, disadvantages, irregularities and things like that. But ultimately, if it's starting the conversation and getting two people around the table to have a discussion about their differences, you're already winning.
Exactly. It's almost like gives people permission to talk about each other. It's great from that point of view. I wouldn't, you know, it's a tool. It's just a tool. And, you know, there's a lot of debate about how scientifically, you know, perfect it is and so on. I just ignore that. Just use it as the basis to have something to talk about. Brilliant. That's the thing.
We've got one here. So people form perceptions of individuals based on their behaviours within a team. This is interesting, actually. To step up from a team player to a team leader requires a change in behaviours. What advice can you give if there anyone considering an internal move to manage the team you are part of today? That's interesting.
Well, does it require different things? I think you've got different responsibilities. You've got additional responsibilities when you step up. But I think it's so important to remain authentic, to continue to be you, not lose sight of that. The thing is, as a manager, as a team leader, you've got a badge now. So what? You know, you still got a group of people. You're still trying to make it work. You may have a bit more authority, but if you rely too much on authority, you're not going to get very far. So it goes back to that thing. Okay, I've got to be concerned about everyone, not myself. I need to create the conditions, but don't get hung up on the badge. Really, just, you know, and think it's about human interaction. It's about communication. Let's not make it too technically complicated.
Great.
Try and keep it simple.
Okay. I have just got my promotion. If we use this as an example, I've been within my team. I've just got the promotion. I've got the badge. It's Monday morning, and I'm now the manager. I'm now responsible for my team. Face like thunder, getting stuff done. What would your advice to me be to, and again, in a coaching context, to ensure that you've got the locker room, you've got the changing room sort of engaged? How do you start that process? Because a lot of people will probably think sort of your first team meeting, your first opportunity to show is very, very important. How would you advise me? What should I be thinking about before?
Well, take a deep breath. Do it steadily. Don't come out with big change.
Okay.
focus on the team. How can I make the chemistry? How can I make it better? I can't, for instance, you might think that person doesn't, maybe that person needs to go and needs to replace them. No, you've got what you've got. How can you make it work better? And I think you have to look at each individual and then formulate a plan around each individual. You can call it development if you like, but it's just a thought about, okay, what can I do? How can I add value to that person? What does that person need to do more of or less of in relation to the team, and also the team? So you would start to look at how we do meetings, and it's important to, I think, not to push yourself out there. You might overreact and say, I've got to be a manager now.
Yeah.
And actually the better thing to do is to be authentic, not necessarily want to control everything, but recognize that for you, right, okay, this thing about engagement and empowerment, that's another big word that's used and thrown around, okay?
Just on that point, we have one of our suggestions for leaders is enablers.
Yes,
which I think that fits quite well.
That's good. I like that.
Really good.
I like that word. They enable us by creating the conditions for them to do it and want to do
it.
Empowerment. How can someone feel empowered if they don't own whatever it is you want them to be empowered to do? So if it's handed down from the boss, you're not going to create empowerment.
No.
The same with engagement. If it's a one-way communication, you're not asking them, you're not listening. That's not engagement. So it all points towards collaboration. It all points towards people having the opportunity to step up and shine. Because I think I look back over my career and I think there's so many people I've seen in junior positions, and sometimes working for me, who I think they're being suppressed. They're not.
Yeah.
It's not coming out, and it's such a shame, And that, again, high-performing team, you wouldn't be suppressing anybody. It'd be, it can be pretty stormy and noisy and loud and vociferous when it happens. But I always think, tell yourself that's a good sign. If people are challenging a colleague in a meeting, a junior person sort of say, I thought we agreed that we would do this. I think whilst that makes things uncomfortable in the moment,
yes,
you should tell yourself as the boss, whoopee.
That's what you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Very good.
You'll find ways to smooth it over, but it's not always smooth running,
Not always plain sailing. I don't know if that's good news or bad news. Let me see.
God, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well done. Thank you
very much. Leaders in business look to delegate, coach, support, and/or direct individuals in a team depending upon their needs to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Do the same leadership styles apply in sport? Leaders in business look to delegate, coach, support, and/or direct individuals in a team depending upon their needs to get the job done.
Right.
Does it apply in sport as well?
In sport, in elite sport, the roles are more clearly defined. So the coach or the head coach, their purpose is clear. It's primarily about performance. These days, it's also about welfare, well-being, and a whole range of other things.
Yeah.
But they'll have a performance director or a manager who looks after a lot of the executive aspects. So I think there are differences, but essentially all the components are there. They may not be held by one person or the same person all the time. But it's quite difficult for coaches because now, if you talk to an elite coach like with rugby or basketball, beach volleyball, any of these bobsled, any of these sports we've worked with, it is multifaceted. So it's not that unusual that yes, they're a coach, but there's a lot of management stuff they have to do because there's a limit to the number of people they've got they can delegate to. If you're not careful, you end up being swamped by all the management stuff and don't have enough time for the coaching. And it's so different in some sports. So in tennis, at top level, the coach is employed. Think about this: the coach is employed by the athlete.
Correct.
So you're not in charge anymore.
It's reversed.
Yes, it's reversed. But actually, I think that's a great mindset to have as a manager, as a leader. Imagine if these people were paying my salary. Well, effectively they are.
Yep.
Right, and that's the right mindset to get into. You owe them something. It's not the other way around. really. So that's a good mindset to get into.
And again, links back to the leaders being enablers as well.
Yes.
You're there on behalf. You have the responsibility. You're there on behalf of your team to clear the path for them, to help them shine.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm mindful of time, but we'll maybe go for one, potentially two more. So we'll go for company boards tend to hire similar people with similar values and backgrounds, but research says diverse teams are more successful.
Yeah.
How can we best sell the idea that diversity of skills / mindsets is the winning combination?
Well, let me tell you about BMW. Okay, so BMW in the UK.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the board recognised that they needed to change. Big step. That's step number one. We need to change. The reason they recognised that was they were attracting graduates. I mean, let's face it. If you want a job where you're guaranteed 2 new cars a year, that's pretty attractive, right?
Pretty good.
And graduates were getting that joining BMW, but they weren't able to keep them. Why weren't they able to keep them? And this is what the board, struggle with. Why can't we keep them? So they last about 18 months because the culture was stuffy, fuddy-duddy, old school, old style.
Yeah.
And the board, bless them, said, yeah, we're looking at the board, we're pale, male and stale. We're all middle-aged men, white men. And not only that, but they all had a particular style in common, apart from one, in that they were all very driven, very positive, push it out there, go out and get it, so make quick decisions, lots of great ideas. You think, well, fantastic, to have a team like that, brilliant. But it was too much. You can't have too much of a good thing. And the one person who wasn't like that, who was much more reflective, considered, was a good problem analyzer. Their voice was being drowned out a lot of the time by the noise going on in the room. And that's where we did use DISC. We did use profiling to highlight this. And the surprise was extraordinary. First of all, the chief executive said, well, we need a bit more like him then, don't we? I said, no. You work with what you've got. You've got to get better at being more adaptable and recognizing you've got too much of a good thing. So the effect it was having was there were lots and lots of initiatives coming out from the board being passed down for managers and teams to deliver. And they were delivering, but they were also getting completely and utterly stressed out. The board recognized this and recognized that, okay, we really do need to change. We need to change the culture. We need to change the way we operate in it. And to their credit, and this is why I can tell you this, because it became, it was presented on conference platforms and so on as a result, was they were able to really change the culture. They moved to flexible working. This is five or 6 years ago now, more. I'll give you one little example is that BMW used to have a dress code, and it was like thicker than that. It was about 80 pages in it. And if you were a male, you had to wear a blue suit or a charcoal suit. You couldn't wear black. You couldn't wear brown. Brown shoes were absolute no-no. And
I wouldn't be at BMW then for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, this wasn't that long ago, but they so they recognised that I got to change. Okay, well, we've got to change this. We're going to appeal to a younger age group and so on. So they set about coming up with a new dress code, and they'd started to try and compose this dress code until the one person in the boardroom who was different to everyone else said, no, we're back to old thinking.
Absolutely.
So they ended up with a phrase that said, come dressed as you feel comfortable, acknowledging that who you may be meeting that day. That was it. So
subtle but key.
Yeah.
Perfect. Phil, we're going to wrap it up there. But I suppose before we go, I think it's Friday afternoon. Our viewers will have the weekend to digest all of the insights that you've so passionately sort of shared with us today. What would your one takeaway be, or what would be the one thing that you would love to leave with our viewers to sort of distill over the weekend so that they can go into next week with maybe a little bit of a renewed look or a different perspective on what they're doing?
Yeah, I think whatever your role, whatever your level, you are an influencer do reflect, but do take some time to reflect on where you are, understand yourself, other people, as we've said, but recognize that you can influence things, and it's important. Actually, the organization, the team, it needs that to happen. It needs that to happen, and you will become a high-performing team if the more you do that, and your colleagues do that, then you can shape things. The only thing that I don't want to finish on a negative, really, but if you've got a nightmare boss, that might not be possible, right? But they are few and far between. Everyone can be helped.
Very good. Phil, thank you so much for your insights today. It's been absolutely fantastic, and by the amount of comments and questions that we've had in, it's really resonated with our audience as well. Which leads me to say, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely fantastic to host you. Though this recording will be available later on, so please do stay tuned, and you can catch up at a later point should you wish. Without much further ado, have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.